Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Virgo of the 27th of February. And of course, I'm going to be talking about a lot of other things besides that too. And the reason why is that a new moon or a full moon does not exist in isolation. Otherwise, it would be the identikit experience time and time again. No, it's part of a whole celestial story. In other words, what the rest of the planets are doing, the background against which, in this case, the full moon is taking shape. And on this occasion, this full moon in Virgo, it's connecting with the main alignment of the times, and that is the Saturn-Uranus square. To be specific, the moon in Virgo is trining Uranus. It's an angle of harmony, but it's also inconjunct or quincunx Saturn, and that's an angle of tension. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in a moment, but the other thing that I thought was interesting about this particular full moon is not a supermoon, but in fact the next full moon in Libra in March will be a supermoon, as will the one after that, the one after that, and the one after that. So we've got 4 supermoons in a row to come. But what this full moon is interesting for is some of its names. It's often called a snow moon because it tends to occur, well, certainly in the northern hemisphere, when there's a lot of snow around. And certainly if you are where I am, we are really deep in snowland. But the other name that I was really drawn to for this full moon is called the Groundhog Moon. Now, it's called the Groundhog Moon in the Algonquin tradition. That's the Eastern Canada. But of course, earlier in the month, we had Groundhog Day, the 2nd of February. And it sort of reminds me a little bit because talking about this full moon and what we need to be aware of, what we need to look out for, could be a little bit of a groundhog experience, given that I have talked about a couple of things before, only in many ways we can't know enough about this Saturn-Uranus square because it's going to affect us so profoundly over the next 2 or 3 years. Now, one of the important things that we need to know about this full moon is that it comes with the theme of closure and completion. And all of us have that theme to this full moon, but it depends where in your chart that full moon is occurring. But it certainly occurs, whether we're a Capricorn or whether we're a Libra, whatever we may be as far as our sun sign is concerned, that full moon in Virgo will be somewhere in our horoscopes. And when we talk about closure and completion, it can have a very positive edge to it because it means we've come to the end of that and we can close the book on it and now we can move on to something else. But sometimes an ending, that sort of closure, can be a little bit painful. Now, when I think about this full moon, we've got the sun in Pisces. The sun, in fact, entered Pisces on the 19th of February, a little bit before this full moon. And that means that it's the last sign of the zodiac. The sun in Pisces, opposition the moon in Virgo, the sun is in the 12th sign of the zodiac. And one of the things about Pisces is that it is said to have the whole of the zodiac's experience within it. And when we think about Pisces and we think about its association with the 12th house of a natal chart, the 12th house of a chart, then we're looking at an area where a lot of dissolution goes on, not disillusion, dissolution and processing. So we're processing experiences and we're dissolving them in order to be able to move on. And I think this is particularly the case with Pisces and Virgo on this occasion. We're looking particularly for Pisces at processing kind of painful experiences, things that have happened perhaps in the last 6 months that may have been a little upsetting, that we haven't enjoyed very much, but really we have to process them and put them away. For Virgo, this same process is comes in regard to the full moon, but it's kind of different on this occasion because of the full moon's connection to Saturn and Uranus. I think we're looking at the area of work and the area of well-being for a lot of Virgos. So it's perhaps processing a lot of experiences that need to be put away, and they're particularly in regard to work. And what's coming forward, if you like, is the idea of new horizons, where if that means new jobs or new experiences at work, new ways of working, or whether it's related a little more to our lifestyle and our overall health, and looking towards new horizons that we'll be moving towards. For Pisces and Virgo especially, we're looking at relationships here. So the idea of closure and completion may apply very much to a working relationship or a romantic relationship. And what do we do when we're closing and completing? We're either saying this relationship is done, it's over, or we're saying, we've completed this stage of a relationship and we're now ready to notch it up a bit. And what's interesting here is looking at the relationship between the new moon in Virgo, which occurred on the 17th of September last year. So 6 months ago, what happened at that time, whether in regards specifically to relationships or other things, we've reached a point of closure by the time we come to the 27th of February. Now, there are another two signs who are in the front line, if you like, of this kind of theme, and that's Gemini and Sagittarius. Here, it's not so much about relationships. It's more about where am I going in life? My ambitions, my, long-term horizons. And on the other hand, where I've come from, what my home base is, my family, my roots. So this full moon has to do with closure and completion related to those two areas of life. So for Gemini and Sagittarius, it might be about the end of a job and perhaps moving on to a new one or a new position. But it's also for Sagittarius and Gemini, this idea that perhaps something in the family has come to an end. Maybe often look at this, the idea of children moving on, growing up, moving into school life or university life or something like that. And that marks the end of a chapter in terms of our family. And of course, we can move home, we can change location, which is also the end of an era in terms of our base, our location, and to a certain extent, our outlook in life. So for those four signs in particular, we can see how this full moon will play out. And for every other sign of the zodiac, bearing in mind these themes, the idea of tying up loose ends, of dissolving painful experiences, of thinking them through and leaving them behind. As I often say, every stage of life, and we have big stages of life, every 7 years, in keeping with the Saturn cycle and actually the Uranus cycle as well, we go on to a new chapter, a new stage of life. And what we don't want to do is carry along all the clutter of the previous act. We have to put things aside. And again, this is a very, very strong theme of this particular full moon. Now, I said that this was Groundhog Moon, and so we're having a bit of a groundhog video here. I want to look again at the Saturn-Uranus square. Now, I've got a new kind of way of looking at this, a new metaphor for you, and we're looking at the irresistible object, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. That's a very, very good metaphor for this particular alignment. Saturn representing the immovable object, and Uranus, the irresistible force. Now, we can look at this in terms of old orders not giving way to new orders because the threat of the new is just too kind of scary. And we can see that again in our national politics and our international relations. We can see it in events, locally, things that we watch on our news channels. And of course, we meet it in our own lives. And I think in reference to this period of time, and we look at the 25th of February, when we've got the moon in Leo opposing Saturn and squaring Uranus, a couple of days before the full moon, the moon in Virgo then trines that Uranus and inconjuncts Saturn. And what I would say is that if we have a metaphor here, it would be like putting your foot hard down on the accelerator, going at speed, and unfortunately meeting an immovable object. So I suppose in our individual lives, while we want to maybe break through those situations that are causing blockages, and we're sick and tired of not seeing any movement in them, sometimes movement over time is imperceptible, but there is movement going on. We can try gently to forge the changes in situations that we need to do, and courtesy of the universe, they will break when they're ready to break. Now, another phrase I've used a lot, whether it's on these videos or whether it's in my forecasts and my Friday Bites, is this idea of Uranus representing new thinking. And I think this is another very healthy way of looking at why this Saturn-Uranus dyad is so important to us. Now, I had a comment on my videos, and it was about the idea of new thinking not being good. And this person was using this in regard to politics, really. The idea that the new thinking, in particular, relating it to the new administration coming into the White House, that must represent left wing. Well, not at all. It's got nothing to do with left wing. It's got nothing to do with right wing. It may have to do with old political orders coming to an end and new orders coming in, but it's not at all leftish. What new thinking is about what we've been through in our individual lives and what we've been through as humanity, if you like. And it's largely due to everything that the coronavirus brought with it, the change in our livelihoods, in our social life, in our home conditions, in everything. And it stopped things being the way they were. So what are we going to do about that? Just wait until things naturally come back? Well, they're not going to come back, a lot of them. What do we need? We need new thinking. We need to find new ways in which to live and to socialize and to do all those things. So new thinking in regard to Uranus being the new thought side of old thinking Saturn, that really is a very positive kind of thought. All right, so finally, just, trying to catch up on all these things. In general, coming back to this idea of Pisces being the last sign of the zodiac. So the sun is in the 12th house of the zodiac wheel, the moon in Virgo in the 6th house of the zodiac wheel. For all of us, in reference to this great cycle of the zodiac, this period of the year is the end of a season. Now, for some of us, that season that's ending is winter, and we're coming into spring. On the vernal equinox, on the 20th, 21st of March, the sun enters Aries, 0 degrees of Aries. And of course, when we look at the traditional view of Aries and 0 degrees of Aries as beginning the spring, we see the Aries lamb coming into experience as a newfold lamb. But even if we're in the southern hemisphere and we're looking at this seasonal change being from summer into autumn, it's still a change of season. And inasmuch as we might think about changing our clothes, putting them away in the closet and saying, well, we'll bring those out next year, and getting new gear to wear, new activities, and we see that reflected in the change of the season, what I want to look at really for all of us in regard to this 12th house, 6th house kind of view of things is that all of us need to really put behind us painful experiences. Of course, they're part of our history. They're part of us. They live in us in some way. But we must also find a way of putting them behind us because life must go on. Life, is beckoning us forward. So certainly on this full moon, 27th of February, if you manage to catch sight of it and you see it, whether it's in the day sky as that kind of ghostly spectre, or whether it's in the night sky, luminous, we need to think about putting painful experiences behind us, accepting them, accepting that they still live within us, but that we can move forward from there. And I think that's a really positive message to end this video on. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you again in a couple of weeks, and of course, all the time on my audios and on my website, Astrolutely. Bye for now.